On Friday, I said this 4-game homestand is make or break for the Pelicans, and in today's episode, I'll tell you how Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and yes, head coach Willie Green have New Orleans back on track after just 2 games. It's the Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday. We are tipping off a week's worth of shows here. And look, I was pretty pessimistic last week. I'm less pessimistic right now for y'all. I think New Orleans actually figured some things out over these first 2 games of the homestand. I'm going to tell you why. It's around Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram, and yes, head coach Willie Green. We're going to look at the win over the Indiana Pacers. The 2 stars playing like stars, but there was so much more in that game that I'm excited to break down for you. In the second game against the Atlanta Hawks, they lost. But this was a moral victory if you've ever seen one. And yeah, this was actually a pretty important game for the Pels. Then let's get into Yves Missi, starting Brandon Boston Jr. looking good, and a couple of other notes from this team. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Become an everyday. I'm losing my voice. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. A lot of y'all were at the arena on Friday, on Sunday, saying hi to me when you see me walking around, screaming every day at me. I love it. Thank you all so much for listening. Please come up and say hi if you see me. Don't be afraid. I'll come chat hoops with y'all for a little bit. But let's get into the win over the Indiana Pacers. It was 125-118. This was a massively important victory for New Orleans. On that 4-game road trip, they looked terrible. They looked terrible. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. They look bad. I thought if they did not do well on this homestand, they should fire head coach Willie Green. I stand by that. Well, they turned it around some. And in that game over the Pacers, this was about Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram being star players and a bunch of other stuff. You show up and you lead and you score. And the scoring was good. They paced the team here in this game. Zion had 34 points, 10 assists. Brandon Ingram had 26 points and 7 assists. They fought hard. They played really good defense. They were phenomenal in this game, in my opinion. So the scoring numbers were good, but Will Guillory's quote from The Athletic really summed it up to me. And he says, quote, "The force they played with and not the points Williamson and Ingram accounted for stood out the most on Friday. They attacked early and often instead of waiting for the defense to load up against them," end quote. The star players need to do their jobs, and they did in this one. They responded, they were motivated, they knew what they needed to do, and more importantly, they worked well together. One of the things you do not see enough of with this team is Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram in actions together, running pick and rolls together, playing off one another. They did in this game, and it was beautiful. They took over the fourth quarter. And it allowed this team to get that victory. You saw them running pick and rolls, running lobs to each other, basically playing a 2-man game that you never see from them. I don't know why it's taken so long to kind of get that out of them, and we only saw it in this one game because Zion didn't play on Sunday, but I'm glad we did. And when these star players are being star players, it allows other guys to fit into their roles perfectly. Among the starters, and the starting lineup in this game was Jose Alvarado, Hawkins, Missi, Zion, and Ingram. Only Zion and Ingram had turnovers. Missi didn't have one. Hawkins didn't have one. Jose didn't have a single turnover. In fact, they only had 6 turnovers total. The only other person to turn the ball over, and it was just one time, was Javonte Green. When your star players act like star players and play like they should, it makes everybody else's life easier. 6 turnovers the entire game is perfect for this team. On Friday, I told you not to worry about Zion Williamson. He's too good of a player. He's too talented, and he has not regressed that he would figure it out when he just decided to kind of turn it on and stop being so passive. Wasn't passive in this game at all, and he looked phenomenal. 14 of 20 from the field. 6 rebounds, 10 assists, 2 steals, 3 turnovers, that's fine. 34 points, plus 17 on the night. Brandon Ingram, 26 points, 7 assists, 6 rebounds. He took 8 threes, making 3 of them. What this team needed. A steal, 2 blocks, 2 turnovers. Fantastic. Ingram's passing in particular in this game was honestly a freaking masterclass, in my opinion. I might do a short film study and try something new out with y'all, looking at some of his assists and breaking it down. We'll even have an audio version of it as well, because some of the things he did is really elite, like veteran crafty assist making stuff, and I loved what we saw from him in this game. He's been an underrated passer for a while, but it was on full display in that one. But beyond them, the others played too. Yves Missi got his first start, and he played great, really limiting Miles Turner to an off night and not letting the guy that New Orleans has wanted to trade for a while make really any sort of massive impact. Turner was a minus 19 in this game. 12 points, 4 boards. That's it. 5 of 12 shooting. Not great. You had... Collectively, as a defense, they did a very good job on Tyrese Halliburton. 11 points on 2 of 8 shooting. He had 11 assists, certainly, but he was a minus 19. Your starters won their minutes. That is something that we've said we really need to see from this team. The communication on defense, the effort really helped them get a win. And that was a big complaint of mine when they were on the road, that lack of effort, that lack of being prepared and ready. They were prepared, they were ready, they were motivated in this one in a way that we did not see New Orleans at all on the road. I've said it's one thing to lose. It's one thing to lose in lifeless fashion, and that's what New Orleans has been doing. All life in this one. And look, the coaching was really good, and I think that continued in the game in Atlanta against Atlanta too. Making the decision to start Missi wasn't necessarily an easy one, but it was the correct one. And look at how they used Hawkins, running him through multiple screens. And I'm going to talk more about him in the next segment, but it's going to apply to what we saw in the game against the Pacers as well. They found ways to get him open for shots. That's not always easy to do when you're on the game plan. More on that in a minute. Hawkins had 23 points. He took 8 threes. He got to the line 8 times, 4 rebounds as well. He was really good in this one. They gave a bigger role to Brandon Boston Jr., who had 14 points. They looked like a different team. They looked like an entirely different team, whether it was just they could come home, they weren't sleeping in hotels, there was just more preparation. Whatever it was, they did not look like the Pelicans from a week ago, and that is a very good thing given how bad New Orleans looked. This is credit to everyone within the organization for quickly turning that around. And think about that they're doing that without the other guys. They're missing 4 of their top 6 guys. Still no CJ McCollum, no Trey Murphy, no DeJounte Murray, and no Herb Jones. To do what you did in this game against a pretty good Indiana Pacers team that you should score against, and they did, I'm really happy with what we saw in this one game. Gave me a lot of hope for the Pelicans to really get going and become a very good team this season. And while they didn't beat the Atlanta Hawks, I actually think they might have played better in that game. And I'll tell you why. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by our sponsor, BetterHelp. I want to take a moment and thank you, the listeners here, for making Locked On Pelicans part of your day, for saying hi to me at the arena. Look, there's a reason I do the show, and a lot of it's just because of y'all, and it's so much fun being part of this community. You know, this month is all about gratitude. And along with all y'all who I just wanted to shout out, you know, there's another person we don't talk about enough or thank enough, and that's ourselves. And sometimes it's hard to remind ourselves that we're trying our best to make sense of everything, and in this crazy world, that isn't easy. So here's a reminder to send some thanks to people in your life, including yourself. So look, therapy can help you practice gratitude. It can try and help you improve your life. You don't need to have gone through major trauma to need therapy. It can just empower you to be the best version of you, set boundaries, learn coping skills, or just work through a problem or two that you're having that you don't really know how to handle. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. What I love about it is it's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. And all you do is just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So let the gratitude flow with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA to get started. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday in the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Now for your second listen. It's not really a second listen. I want you to... Where did it just go? Oh, to read something. And that's the Locked On Pelicans newsletter. Introducing the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter delivered right to your inbox for one-stop shop for ultimate team and league coverage. You can sign up for free over at LockedOnDaily.com. That's LockedOnDaily.com to start your day with the all-new free Locked On Pelicans newsletter. We have great national writers we picked up. You'll get an article about the Pelicans, a national article, a fantasy basketball article, and then links to other Pelicans coverage you've got to check out. So make sure you subscribe over at LockedOnDaily.com. So let's move on from the Indiana Pacers and the star players taking over and seeing some other really good things in that game to a game that they lost, 126-111 against the Atlanta Hawks. It's a 15-point loss, but honestly, that final score doesn't really state how close this game was for the most part. I thought this game might have been better for New Orleans than the game against the Indiana Pacers. I thought they played fantastic in this game. And that's really when you factor in the injuries. It's weird to say that in a 15-point loss. But Zion Williamson was a late scratch in this one with right hamstring soreness. Let's get that out of the way right now. I don't know if he's playing tonight on the second night of a back-to-back against the Portland Trailblazers, so we will talk more about this on Wednesday. If he plays, it's not really a thing we need to worry about. If he doesn't, that maybe sheds some more light about the injury. So let's wait a day. We'll talk more about it. If he's out, then I'm going to start to get concerned. If maybe we hear there was some imaging done, that's going to be a concern as well. Let's wait a little bit longer since we're going to kind of get an update immediately, and we don't need to speculate when it comes to that. So that's kind of the big thing. But honestly, in this one, I was impressed by the Pelicans. You're down 5 of your 6 best players. No Zion Williamson, DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum, Trey Murphy, Herb Jones, along with other guys just being banged up. Hawkins was questionable for this one. Yves Missi and Daniel Tice have been dealing with injuries as well. To come out and not have the best start, but fight your way back into this game, including taking a lead at one point, says a lot about this team. They took a lead in the third quarter of this game, briefly, and by like a point, but they did. They played well, all things considered how injured they were. This was a game where you could lose by 30, 40 points. The starting lineup was Jose Alvarado, Jordan Hawkins, Javonte Green, Brandon Ingram, and Yves Missi. You played significant minutes with Jeremiah Robinson Earl, who was on a 2-way deal last year, Brandon Boston Jr., who's on a 2-way deal this year, Jamal Cain, who's on a 2-way deal this year, Daniel Tice, who was almost out of the NBA, this season, and you were competitive. That speaks to this team figuring some things out, and that's why I'm so impressed with this. They were coached up for this one. There was a good game plan here, and I want to get into Jordan Hawkins on this one in particular. 19 points on 7 of 18 shooting might not seem that good. That's under 40% shooting from the field. That's not particularly good efficiency, but here's the thing. They found a way to get him 8 good looks from 3. That's not easy to do here. Go back a couple of games to that first game against the Golden State Warriors where I was so frustrated with that one because Hawkins took 1-3. You had Zion Williamson, you had Brandon Ingram, and Jordan Hawkins took 1-3 in that game. And before the game against the Indiana Pacers, I was talking to Antonio Daniels, and I'll ask him to come on the show soon. And we were talking about it. And, he was like, Jake, you're asking for the coach to be fired. Like, relax a little bit. It's still early. And I said, hey, talk me through some of this. Like, how does Hawkins take one shot in that game when you need to shoot threes against a three-point shooting team? And his answer, which, look, I trust what Antonio Daniels says. He's a good friend of the show. We have a good relationship. He's like, Hawkins is on their scouting report, right? The book's out on him or what you need to do to defend him. You just don't give him any space. And Antonio Daniels goes to me, he's like, Steve Kerr is telling that team, don't go under on screens with Jordan Hawkins. Don't give him any room to shoot a three. And that's part of the reason why he only took 1-3 in this. So let's say other coaches know that too. take away his three-point shooting. It limits him. He can't make an impact on the game whatsoever. So to play a game where your only real threats, right? The only guys that you're like, we can't let those two beat us is Brandon Ingram and Jordan Hawkins. And to find ways to get Jordan Hawkins open, that's a really impressive thing from the coaching staff that I've been really critical of recently. And when you watch that game, and if you go to NBA.com/stats and you can click on the 8 when it comes to his three-point attempts and watch them all, they were doing some really creative things. They were running him through multiple screens. So one screen, then another guy sets a screen to spring him open for three. They were running him in pick and pop situations. They were running him through drag screens. They were running pin down screens for him. I could get in all the jargon that doesn't matter. What they were doing was finding ways to create looks for three from Jordan Hawkins. That is good coaching here. That's the coaching staff realizing, hey, we need to shoot some threes. We don't have Zion Williamson here. That actually makes your shot diet a little bit easier to shoot threes with. We've got to find ways to get this guy going, and they did. The efficiency wasn't there, but sometimes you just miss shots. It can be a make or miss league. It can be that simple. But the process to get those shots is good. I don't care if you're missing I care if you're missing shots, but if you're missing shots, but the shots are created in good open looks, you live with that because over time, over a larger sample size this season, that's going to lead to really good things. It's process over results, right? And the process in this game down that many guys was a really great job by the coaching staff. It would have been very easy, and the Hawks tried to do this, to just put 2 on Ingram, 2 on Hawkins, and let anyone else beat you and be like, they won't do that. And so for New Orleans to play like they did and find ways to create openings for Jordan Hawkins shows coaching, shows growth from this team that they are figuring some things out. And that's why I view this as a really good loss. Look, moral wins don't count in the win-loss column, but this is absolutely a moral victory for New Orleans. And while I would have liked it if they had won, what I'd said on this homestand was, you got to look like a different team. Through the first 2 games, they definitely have. Brandon Ingram was also great in this game. 32 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists. 4 of 8 from 3. Thank you. On Brandon Ingram, he is doing what he's been asked. He's been good, particularly these past 2 games where he's doing what you want him to do. The pull-up threes are great off of pick-and-roll situations when they go under screens, and he's like, all right, I'll just shoot a 3. We hadn't seen that version of him before. Catch and shoot threes in the corner, relocating there, kind of going there, knowing that he's going to get the ball and he's planning on taking the 3. That's really good too. You've seen him attack the basket more as well. The three-point shooting is important for him because, look, it opens up the lane for him to drive when they start closing out on him, but it also makes him an even better passer, in my opinion. This is someone who then can kind of have room to pass the ball when defenders aren't just sagging off of him and can't play the passing lanes as well. He's been phenomenal with this. The three-point shot's an important thing when it comes to that. You're not going to get a perfect shot chart from him, but he's doing what he's asked, and you can live with that. He played fantastic in this game, I thought. Again, they lost by 15, and I'm thrilled with how they played. When you have that many guys out, at the end of the day, the talent on the roster is going to win, and the Hawks had more talent here. But the Pelicans battled. They looked prepared. They fought on that side of the ball. They forced 16 turnovers. All of that is really good, in my opinion, by the New Orleans Pelicans and showing growth. This makes me believe this team can really get going and turn things around. I'm happy with what we saw from them in this one. You have Zion Williamson in this one. It could be an entirely different game. One thing that I do want to note here, they took 38 threes. That's close to that 40 number that they've talked about. I've long said I don't think 40 is like a realistic number when you have Zion Williamson playing. If he's using a third of the possessions when he's on the court, if you want to hit 43s, like everyone else just needs to be shooting from 3, and this team doesn't quite have the roster to do all of that. But this was a game where it was like, yeah, you need to lean in on shooting 3s because Zion's not going to be eating these possessions at the rim. So take 3s when you can get them. New Orleans did 38 shot attempts from 3. They made 16 of them. Hawkins was 3 of 8. Ingram was 4 of 8. You had Jeremiah Robinson or Earl at one point make 2 out of 3. Jamal Cain came in off the bench and gave you 3 of 5 shooting from deep. Brandon Boston Jr. took 3 attempts. Jose went 1 for 7, but he's taking them. This was a good all-around effort, knowing that the game plan needed to be like, take more 3s in this one. They did. They could have won if they were healthy, right? Like, you look at this game and you're like, oh yeah, if they weren't missing 5 of their 6 best players, they would win this game. When we looked at that Golden State Warriors 2 games, that game against the Portland Trailblazers. I saw a team that if you put DeJounte Murray on it, they weren't going to win those games. Now, he maybe changes their kind of complexion of energy, effort, all of that, but they weren't going to win those games. You put DeJounte Murray in there. You add DeJounte Murray to this one, he wins. They win. And so I think they've started just running some plays, running more sets, being really smart about how they're using guys and creating those things. When it comes to three-point attempts, particularly in this game, it's not about just jacking up 43s to hit an arbitrary number, right? You'd hit that in a quarter. Just launch from three and you hit that. Cool, right? We should win. That's not how it works. It's about creating 40 good looks from three. They manufactured a lot of good looks in this one. They manufactured a lot of good looks, even if they weren't the 40 number against the Indiana Pacers. If you're doing that, good things will come. And I've been impressed with what we've seen from the team on this 2-game homestand. Or on this 4-game homestand through 2 games so far. Now, the question is, can they do it consistently? That's the big one. Let's talk a little bit about that along with some other good performances. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, the NBA, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Look, in the fourth quarter of this one, you could see the game getting away from New Orleans. That's the time to jump in and get on that live odds and say, oh yeah, New Orleans is about to give up. They're about to be done because the talent just isn't there. You're probably getting good odds on the Atlanta Hawks to win by a certain spread. Jump in on that when you know what's going on here. Or if you feel like getting on the action tonight against the Portland Trailblazers, New Orleans is favored by 2.5. They're going to compete well. Do you have a feeling about Zion Williamson? Take the points, give up the points. You can do it just by going to FanDuel.com and joining today. And if you do, you're going to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official and official sports betting partner of the NFL and the official sports book of Locked On. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well and become an everydayer. That means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. So please subscribe. And for your second listen, Locked On Saints. It's time to fire Dennis Allen, right? It's definitely time to fire Dennis Allen, I think. Will they? Are they going to do it at the end of the season? Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints, is going to make sense of everything for you there. So make sure Locked On Saints is your second listen today. And don't forget the Locked On Pelicans daily newsletter. You can sign up over at LockedOnDaily.com. So let's start to wrap up from the weekend here. 2 games that made me feel really good about this team. Again, I'm usually a pretty optimistic person. Like if I come on the show and I'm like, this team sucks, don't even watch. Like, why would you come and listen to Locked On Pelicans again? It's kind of a philosophy I have. But I also like basketball. I think there's interesting things going on. I think there's interesting discussions to be had around the team. Frankly, these type of discussions make being a fan fun, in my opinion. I like being part of that here. So I was pretty pessimistic, like borderline. I didn't say they needed to fire head coach Willie Green. I said if they don't show massive improvement, whether it's wins or losses or whatever, but show improvement on this 4-game homestand, you've got to make some sort of change because it's not working. To me, in 2 games, they've already shown that. But you do need to do it consistently. If you look lackluster tonight against the Portland Trailblazers, we're going to have some more hard conversations. What about on Wednesday against the Cleveland Cavaliers? They're the best team in the NBA right now. They're 7-0. Right? I'm not expecting them to win that game, but you've got to fight. You can lose by 20, but still fight. That's what's bothered me so much about that 4-game road trip where they should have gone 0-4 in my opinion, because they just looked like the worst team against teams that they were more talented against, even with the injuries to New Orleans. These games show you they're capable of being better. You can point to injuries as an excuse all you want. You then don't go and beat the Indiana Pacers and look like you did. You don't be competitive against the Atlanta Hawks. You just roll over and you lose by 40. That was a good 15-point loss in my opinion. It has to be consistent. We've seen these flashes from Zion Williamson, from Brandon Ingram, but does it last 10 games in a row? Does it last over the course of a season? No, it doesn't. Ingram's been great for 2 right now. Zion for 1. It needs to be more than that. Can they be consistent is the big question going forward right now. We're going to start to find out. So to me, that's the biggest thing kind of right now with the team. Where are they? Are they doing all of that? The answer is, we'll find out pretty soon. But also, you're getting some contributions for other guys that I think has been really great and really important. Brandon Boston Jr. has looked really good. This was a guy I liked a lot actually coming into the draft, and I was glad New Orleans picked him up on a 2-way when they did. He looked good against the Indiana Pacers, just going out and being a scorer for this team, getting to the rim, passing the ball, grabbing rebounds, just an energy guy off the bench. 14 points from him in that game against the Atlanta Hawks, and I just lost the game against the Indiana Pacers here too. I don't know why. But he was also really good. I looked at the wrong stats for Brandon Ingram 32 points in this game. I don't know what happened and why things have changed here. But he was good in both the games. So 14 points against the Hawks. Let me pull up his numbers here against the Indiana Pacers. Weird. Well, I don't know what happened to my screen here. It's late. It's Sunday. I'm tired. I'm getting sick. You can probably hear it in my voice. 14 points then, too. He had 2 14-point games. Cool. Good for him. He's done really well. I actually thought you could have started him over Javonte Green in this game. Green does a lot of the dirty work, but you needed a little bit more scoring. Boston Jr. looks like he can kind of be that like lightning in a bottle guy off the bench, come in, give you a couple quick points, and then you pull him. If you need some points, that's a guy that I want to see get more minutes. And you heard Willie Green say, even after that game against the Warriors, that Brandon Boston Jr. was going to be getting a larger role, and he felt pretty good about that. And he played really well against the Pacers, 14 points on 9 shot attempts. Here against Atlanta, it was 14 points on the 10 shot attempts, the 5 rebounds, 4 assists in a larger role. He's played well. I want to see him get more minutes and see what he's capable of doing. I thought they had good minutes from Jeremiah Robinson-Earl in this one. 2 of 3 from deep, 7 rebounds fighting. They were all basically offensive rebounds, which was needed in a game like this. You need him to get some of those defensive rebounds too, because you saw Atlanta feasting a little bit, though not horrible with it. But that's a group that, you can kind of get away with it with, but you definitely want them to kind of figure out some of the rebounding here and hopefully kind of move in that direction. That's an area that JRE can definitely help. But if he gives you some shooting like that, you can find minutes for him, definitely. Jamal Cain came in and hit a couple threes. That was really great. I thought in this game, the Daniel Tice minutes have been good recently, and I've loved what we've seen from Yves Missi. Limited minutes. He's not ready to play above 30 minutes, but he's been impactful in the minutes that he's playing so far. That's going to work. He looks like the starter, the guy who should be starting going forward. Just gives them energy on there. He's better with the ball than we thought. He's a slightly better scorer than we thought. All of that's really, really great. I've been happy from him. Really good growth from the rookie, and proving me wrong about that pick and a lot of others wrong about that pick as well. So things are trending in the right direction, in my opinion, for the New Orleans Pelicans. Can they keep it up? We're going to find out tonight against the Portland Trail Blazers, a team you're favored by, would be underdogs on the road. But you got to win this one. We'll find out about Zion Williamson. That's going to be kind of telling. He did go through his warm-ups, and I have some more stuff for you on him in a way that I think he's growing and changing too. I'm going to save that one maybe on Wednesday when we talk more about his injury and that and what's going on there. And we'll look at Zion a little bit more on Wednesday. Get you set for that game against the Cleveland Cavaliers as well. So a lot of really great stuff to come here on the Locked On Pelicans podcast. We'll recap this game against the Portland Trail Blazers. Are they still moving in the right direction? Did they take a step back? All of that here right now, or technically, tomorrow. I'm off my game here. You can all hear it on the Locked On Pelicans podcast. So as always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. See y'all tomorrow for an 8:30 p.m. tip-off game, and we'll recap it on Tuesday.